Hello, this is Danny from CG Dreams. This is part 2 of a multi-part video tutorial of how to rig a Bumble Bee in Cinema 4D R25 onwards. In this particular part we're going to start off with custom controllers and then we're going to move on from there into other aspects of the rigging process. This is the part where we start creating our custom controllers, or indeed ones that are already there. And the controllers that we're going to be selecting on the screen will be made out of splines. And controllers that are invisible to the eye on the screen but still can be used as controllers we use as nulls. But we're going to concentrate on controllers with splines. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a brand new scene so I can show you a few things that you can do to create your own custom ones. So as an example here, we can go to our spline palette and you can see here that we've got all of these different shapes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a rectangle, change its orientation in the object settings, and then I'm going to go in there and I'm going to select, let's have a look, say this four-sided. And what I'm going to do between these two is I'm going to create something entirely different from it. And this is the beauty about using splines. Let's just select this and put it the same orientation. I'm going to scale this up. Get my square shaped spline. I'm going to convert these into editable splines. Select them both, make editable. This is going to open up the chance for us to manipulate this in a more conventional way that we're used to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make an arrow out of these two, and I'm going to keep it relatively simple just to show you what can be done. I'm going to create that. Now you can see that this is representing an arrow. What we need to do is we need to be able to turn this into an arrow as one complete piece. So I'm just going to select these points, move that back a little bit, and then we're going to select this tool which is so handy, and it's called a spline mask. We're going to drag these two into the spline mask, and I like to change the axis to viewport, and this tends to do exactly what I want it to do. Another way that you can do this is you can look at it from, say, a top view, and that can work quite well with the other type of selections, but you can go through these different types of projections, you could say. Now the beauty about this is we've now created something very unique, but we can go and take it a step further. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine it just by applying it, and then we can apply symmetry to this to create a two-sided arrow as an example there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep it really simple. Rather than use symmetry, I'm just going to hold down the control key and rotate, and then if you hold down the shift key it will allow you to lock to the 180 degree axis, as you can see there. And then I'm just going to overlap them. Then I'm going to select these both, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to select these, I'm going to hold down the control key while I'm rotating, it creates a copy, then the shift key simultaneously, and it's going to help us lock, you see there, to a 90 degree axis. And now what we've got is we've got ourselves a controller that can be used for a multiple directional controller. And of course you can go in there and do anything that you need to do to this to manipulate it to how you want it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select these two as one, right click and click on connect objects and delete, and I'm going to select these two, connect objects and delete, and then I'm going to go and select my spline mask and chuck these two in there, and again I'm going to go to the viewport and look what we've got from this. We've got ourselves a controller. So I'm now going to apply this, and I probably don't even need this part in here. Select that, delete it, and I'm going to use this controller, and you can make up loads of different controllers for this. So I'm going to call this Ik foot CTRL for controller. I'm going to copy this and paste it into our scene. You can see here at the moment it's ginormous. We're going to scale this down, and we are certainly going to be using this. We can turn on our axis tool. You can see here down the bottom here, this is activated by this set of coordinates. And we can just zero this off, and that will put us in the center of there. And even then it doesn't seem to have even put that in the center. But none of this really matters, because we're going to be altering the axis point of this. Now this axis to and axis center is actually found from the tools menu. And these are tools that I'm using all the time, and that is why I broke this off. The axis center is something that I use pretty much every single session, every single day. And you can see here, by using this, everything reset to basic again, execute, it brings down that pivot point to the center of the object, and that's perfect. But this pivot point is going to be moved anyway, so that's fine. The main thing is I just wanted to scale it down to be something that kind of represents a reasonable size for this. So we put this under the foot as an example, just to have a look and see how the scale looks. I don't want it too large, but I want it large enough that I can select it. So something like that will be fine. I'm now going to, with that selected, I'm going to go to the basic tools, basic settings for this. So I've just pre-selected it. In the display color material, I'm going to go to custom, and I'm going to choose something completely different, like red as an example. And this has become my controller for us. We're going to be using this controller as our IK controller. We've not got our IK added just yet, but we've got a controller made for us already. So this is really nice to be a kind of a step ahead. So while we're talking about controllers, it's a good point at this stage to delete anything that we don't need. So these nulls, I don't believe we need these anymore. It's good to have a scene cleanup. And these legs, the front, the mid and the right, the left back, I'm going to just copy these names. I'm going to create a null, put them inside a null. And the way I like to do this is hold down the shift key, and it creates the null based upon the first joint. Then I drag it out, and then I drag all the joints into that null. This is so that the axis of the null is facing the same way as the first joint, and there's a good reason for doing this. This will give us consistency when it comes to adding controllers or certain commands to the null, or indeed the first joint. We're going to get consistency by doing this, and you'll understand why this is the case later on. I'm going to do exactly the same for this. I'm going to just hold down the shift key, create a null, put it in there, copy the name, and then name this the same. Drag everything in there. Same thing, we're just going to clean the scene up, put everything in there. Again, I'm middle mouse clicking on all of these. I'm going to go to the chords, freeze all. I'm going to drag and drop these into the rig folder. This is what it's meant for. And this rig folder belongs to the layers for our joints. So I'm going to just drag and drop it on the joints, and you can see here now it's put it into the yellow layer there. So this is good. Our controllers, well, this is going to be a foot controller. We can assign this right now. In fact, master controller, that can go there already. So we're just keeping things clean in the scene as we go. Really, really good to keep this really consistent with keeping things clean and organized. To create our first IK chain, we're going to go from the back leg, and we're going to start the IK chain from one joint down below the first one. This is because we don't want the IK chain to affect the first joint, because this is going to be sitting inside the socket of the thorax, and this part of it doesn't actually move, but all the other joints from that point onwards does move. Now I've got this joint selected here, the left back leg, and with it selected I'm going to press the S key while hovering over the object manager, and it will find that for us so that we can select that. So this is the left back leg trochanter, and then we've got to find what would be typically viewed as the ankle bone. So we select this one, and this is the bone that we want to go down to. All these bones down from this point here is the tarsus, so we only want to go as far as the first bone of the tarsus up down to there, okay, and we want to terminate it from there. We don't want to terminate it here, and you'll see why in a minute. So we're going to go from the trochanter, hold down the control key, we're going to go to the first one, the tarsi 0. That takes us to there. With these two selected, we will go to the character menu and select this create IK chain, and I've got the tool docked over here, the same tool, and we're going to do it from here. When you create this IK chain, you will notice here that we've got this green line, and this green line is denoting where the chain is coming from and going to. Now by default, when you click on that button, create IK chain, it's created what's called a goal, and this goal is a controller that is invisible in the scene, but you can see here that it's actually selected. Now we want to replace this with our own controller, and it's easy to do, but the first thing before we do this, we just need to just make sure it's working for us. But before I make sure it's working, what I like to do is I like to select this controller and freeze it. This is so that if we wanted to return it back to its original position, we can just simply reset it in the reset transform. So I'm just going to grab this handle here and I'm going to move this, and what we're looking for is to see all of the joints in the chain move other than these end joints here and the first joint here. We don't want to see that one move, and you can see here it is indeed working as we expected it to. The other thing to look for is to make sure that everything is aligning nice and bending nice. We don't want the legs to be going all over the place there. So what I'm doing is I'm just looking at it from a different point of view. See that? And that's aligned really nicely for us. Now I'm going to click on reset transform, and it will reset it back to its original position, which is right there. And it's so important that we do this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this controller, because as you can see here, this controller's already in position for the middle leg already. So I'm going to hold down the control key and drag and move that down. And then we're going to move this controller to be located to the back leg. To move it to the back leg, we use a tool called transfer, and that tool can be found in the tools menu. Here it goes, transfer, and we're going to click on that with our copied controller, and we're going to select in this field here the goal that's been created from our IK rig. We don't want to have rotation turned on because we want to maintain the up axis still pointing at the weld up axis. So we click apply, it moves it over, and then when we select this, you can see the Y axis is still pointing up, which is what we want. Now I'm going to look from the top view here, and I'm just going to rotate this into position for the movement of this. Now I don't want to rotate it as the object, but I do want to rotate it with the points. And we can just move this into place. And I want to move this, see on the y-axis there, I want it to be perfectly flat on the floor. So where the selected there, world coordinates, brilliant. And we need this to be 0. We'll just leave that there for now. That's to select our other controller there. We see that that's on 0 as well. Now this one, as you can see, is below the foot. This one you can see is above the foot, as you can see there. It's shown it's got an offset of 0.69 at the moment. The way that which we can fix this is that we can change, you can see here object relative, we change this from that to weld mode, and then it's going to give us where this particular object is located in weld space. And then we can 0 that off. Remember to put it to relative again, and now it's actually put it exactly where it needs to be, which is great. Now this controller is only going to be a controller that we literally lift up and down and kind of move it forwards and backwards, but you can clearly see that the controller is actually misaligned according to the joints. Now the other one, you can see that's aligned up really nice for us, but this one not so, as you can see there. If we select our joint, you can see here that that's lined up perfectly with that. So it's really down to the fact that we just need this controller to be lined up better for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to align that up right now. I'm going to go to my top view. We're going to enable the axis tool. I'm going to rotate this around so it's facing down the joint of the leg, like that. Okay. This is really important that we get this right, so that when we're grabbing the IK controller, it's moving in the correct orientation. This one, as you can see there, that needs rotating. We're going to select that, enable the axis tool, rotate that in the correct orientation with that shift key held down. These are things that we need to get right now and not later. You can see here we're aiming for consistency. It's so important. The only other thing we have to do before we move on to the next stage is just to make sure that the controller in which we copied it from is aligned with its pivot point in the right place. I went ahead and done this. This is by using exactly the same technique so far, and that is that if your pivot point of your controller is in the wrong place, we just simply activate our axis tool, enable snapping, and then just move it over until it's snapped to that joint. You can use the transfer tool, but sometimes the axis snapping is fine. Up until this point, we found that at times we've had the controller to be somewhat 45 degrees out, so for you it may look something like this. I'll just bring that back. May look something like this, and whenever it does, where you've got the axes is pointing in two different directions but they seem to be kind of symmetrical in their position, it's a 45 degree movement or rotation that you need to apply. So that's all you need to do for that. And just remember that when you're rotating your pivot point, you need to enable this axis center so that you don't move the position of what you've already placed down for your controller visual aspect element of it. Now we're going to move on to the next stage of adding our secondary IK. Our secondary IK is going to be from this point here which is the tarsus number 0, and we're going to go all the way down to the claw, this bone here. So all we have to do is to select those two in that order, from tarsus 0 to claw 0 with the control key, and then we're going to apply our IK. So for you, it'll be in the character menu where we click on create IK chain. For me, I've adopted this custom setup here, create IK chain. And now that's created between those 2 points where we can actually move on to the next stage. The next stage for us for this is to create a controller. And to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to create one slightly different to how we've been doing it so far. I'm going to enable my meshes, and I'm going to select the mesh that we're working on, and I'm going to make a controller from an edge selection. And the edge selection I'm going to be choosing is by double clicking through the middle here, and it's going to create this loop. If you haven't got a good loop through your claw like this, then select something similar to this if you want to go this route of making a controller. Once you've selected this, all we need to do then is just go to our mesh menu and select edge to spline. When we go to the mesh itself, let's select this, press the S key while hovering over the object manager, we can expand this, and inside you're going to see this leg spline. I'm going to pull this away from this and pull this all the way to the top, and this is going to be our claw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to name it right now so we know what we're dealing with. So we're dealing with a left, back, claw, IK goal. Whatever you choose to use for your naming, just try to keep it consistent throughout. So that's what this one's going to be for. What I'm going to do with this is I'm going to select this controller that we've just made, and just disable the meshes for the moment here so we can see this. And what we want to do is we want to move this controller away from where it currently is. But before I do that, I want to make sure that it's got its center axis point on the controller to the closest that we can get. And for this I use the axis center. I'll leave it all to default settings and execute. And when I've done that, you can see here that the controller is actually 45 degrees out from where it should be. So this is a easier fix, of course. We go to our axis, we will rotate it with the shift key held down once we've started that movement to 45 degrees, and now you can see that's exactly the way that it should be. That's perfect. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we move the controller that we've got away from here. To do this, we disable the axis center, we go to our points mode, select all, Control and A, and then we will move this forwards. Now you can see here, as soon as I've done this, that I've already got this problem with the axis center kind of being 45 degrees again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable the axis center, rotate, and I'm just going to move this 45 degrees. This is because we've not selected the object, we selected the points. We go to our move tool, disable the axis center, and now we can move it off its axis forward of the foot. This is so that we're going to be able to select it away from the geometry later on. In fact, you can turn on the geometry just to make sure it's clear of it, and that's good. Now what I want to do is I want to move the axis to where it should be for the foot. So we enable the axis center again, and we're going to use our snapping tools, and because it's already centered where it should be easier just to move it up and snap it to its correct destination. Just slightly off there. I'm just going to tweak it until it's on there, and I'm happy with that. That's great. It's good to turn on your mesh every now and again as well when you're doing this, to make sure that nothing's misaligned, like the joints haven't kind of shifted away from where the mesh is. So this is a really good position to be in. Now that we've got this, we can now use these goals. We've got two goals now. We've got this one here, which is our main IK. So I'm going to keep this kind of same naming convention. And we're going to copy and paste it onto there. This time, we're going to select that one, making sure that we've got the right one selected there. So this is the one we want to copy it from. Didn't need to copy that one to there. That's just Control and Z a couple of times. Okay, this is the one that we went to rename. So we will borrow it from here. So we got the Tarsus ones. That's the goal. I like this name convention that we've got here, so we'll stick with this. So this is the back claw, and this is the main IK, the leg IK. Or so back, leg, IK goal. Just move this up here, so we got this claw and the leg IK goal, and we've got the two actual IK goals themselves that have been generated when we applied the IK chain. So we're going to name these respectively as well, so that they are kind of aligning up to what we're using it for. So this is the claw end, so let's just grab this, drag that inside the claw, name the back leg. So we're going to copy this and drag this inside that. So now what we've got is we've got two visual controllers that we select from the viewport, but they're moving the actual IK goals that were generated for us by the IK chain. Now what you can do, if you didn't want to go for this route, you can obviously go down and select these IK tags. You can see here where it says the goal. What you can do in here is you can actually choose the new goal, which is this one here. So we can drag and drop that in here. The only reason I sometimes don't do this is because it can shift the joints where there's a slight difference in the axis between the actual IK goal that we're currently using and the IK goal that we've made for ourselves, the proper one. So in this particular case, let's just have a look here and have a look. You can see here we can select this goal or drag and drop like I've just done, and nothing's shifted. So when this is working like this, you can actually go ahead and just delete this that we put inside there. But there's nothing wrong in you just keeping that inside there and keeping the original goal. Because we can do that, I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to choose the new goal. Okay, click on there. Just make sure you're watching it as you do this, that nothing shifts. And nothing did shift, so we can now delete the original. This keeps things more clearer of what we've got. And that's a really good thing for us, because that is what we want. We want to keep things clear and clean. So we created those two IKs. So how do we arrange these IKs? Well, that's really simple. We want our IK main IK for the leg to be the primary one that moves the entire leg. So I'll just show you this right now. You can see here it moves the entire leg. And then we want our foot or claw IK to move along with it. So all we do is we just drag and drop the claw inside the IK goal for the leg. Now what this means is when we select this goal for the leg, we can move this that we can move this, and we don't have any problems with when we move it. When we select the IK goal for this, well, we can separately move this as well. But what you will notice is when I'm moving this controller here, its rotation is not keeping up with the movement of what's happening with the claw. And another thing that we're missing here is the fact that if we were to rotate this controller, you'll see here it's not rotating the claw, and that's what we want to happen. So we will fix both of these issues in the next stage. To set this up, it's rather simple. All we need to do is we need to select the claw. If it's not showing in the object manager, just press the S key while hovering over here and it will bring it in sight. We need to right click on this and then go to our rigging, constraint. Then we go to transform, and then we make sure that in order for there to be no problems with the flipping of the claw, because there's an offset between the two, the bone and the claw controller, we just click on this maintain original. We need to just make sure that only rotation is turned on, and then we click with the picker and select our claw controller. Now when we select the claw controller, we're going to be able to rotate it. When we select our main leg IK, we're going to be able to move it. And that's all we need to do. We need to then go to the next leg on and make sure that we followed exactly the same steps as we did for the back leg, and that is to select the geometry as we did before. Turn that snapping off for the moment here. Go to the geometry like before, select it, loop select through the center of that. Same thing as before, we go to the mesh, edge to spline, that gives us our controller. If the axis is off, we just need to rotate it. Normally in this particular case it's been about 45 degrees, so we can lock it with the shift key as we rotate it, but we always have to have this axis center turned on when we do this. We need to make sure obviously that this controller here, when we select it, is aligned as it should be here, using the axis center as before. And then we need to apply the IK controllers, or the IK chain, for the leg and for the foot, just as we did for the back leg. So when you come to doing the middle leg and the front leg, just rewind the video, go back to what we did with the back leg, and you should be set to go for the next stage of our rigging. Just remember that as you do this, you need to make sure that you put everything in the correct hierarchical order, select that correct hierarchical order, and then when you've done it, make sure that you assign it as a controller. You can see here you can do it by dragging it into your layers, and then you just drag it out and just drop it in our master controller. And then what this will do is it will help you keep a visual idea of what you've completed and what you haven't completed. And you can see here that this controller isn't complete. You would again make sure that you stay to this same kind of name convention as you're going along. So you can see here that we've got this name convention for this controller. I'm going to copy this right now, go into there, paste it, and instead of it being a back leg, this is going to be the mid leg. Just like that. And then continue to go on and go through this process, and then we can move on to the next stage of setting up these legs. Now that we've done that, you should be able to just check everything is working by clicking on the IK leg. And with the IK leg, you should be able to select that and move that and see that it's functioning like it is here. You then should be able to go a bit closer and select the IK claw. You should be able to rotate that claw, and you should also be able to move the IK for the tarsus. Do this for every single foot. When you've done this, you should have a hierarchical structure which looks like this. You can see here we've got the left IK front foot controller, the left front claw controller, which is a child of that. We've got the same thing for the midfoot and for the back foot, making sure that they're all sharing a similar name convention. You also want to click on the controller with the middle mouse wheel, go to your coordinates and then click on freeze all, so that you make sure you've got something to revert back to should you move anything. The next stage we're going to go into is to creating poles for this, and what the poles are for is to aid the IK in two scenarios. The first scenario is if your leg flips back to front, like your knee area flips back to front, and this can happen right at the L set, or it can even happen when you're moving your IK beyond a certain point of rotation or position. And this also gives us a secondary control over the knees, so that you can move the knees to a different position, and this makes a much more realistic walk cycle when you can see the move just moving slightly ahead of the feet before the feet land in its new position. So that's what we're going to be doing next. To create a pole, we use an existing IK tag that's already been added to the legs. So what I will do for this is I would first hide the mesh if you've got it selected, select a bone, doesn't matter which one, we go over to the object manager and press the S key. The S key will bring you to the joints in which the IK tags have been added to. You can see here the first one here is this one. We go to the attribute, and inside here we create a pole, add pole. As soon as we create this, we want to locate that pole, which will be at the bottom of the hierarchy, and we just drag this out and we drop this into the IK goal for the foot, which is that red controller. Now this is the back foot. You can see here the back foot, not the claw but the foot itself. Once you add this to there, you'll then be able to move this and get slight movement sometimes in this. Move this forwards, move this up, and it just creates a distance between those joints above what we would call like the knee area. Once we've done this, we can go ahead and create our own controller. And what I like to do is I'd like to create a controller within this, because we know it's located in the right place. So what I do is I select this, hold down the shift key, and I'm going to select this one here to create a controller. And that way it's going to put it inside and adopt its position and location. I'm going to go to the object and then just bring this down to a size that's more reasonable to handle. Right away I'm going to go straight to this, and I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees with the control key held down to start with. It's going to replicate it, and then I'm going to hold down the shift key until it clicks on 90 degrees. I'm now going to select these two controllers, right click, and then click on connect objects and delete. So it's creating one single one there. Now I've got this in this position. I'm going to select this controller. That you can see it's not adopting the same position as that. That's fine. That's exactly the way we want it, however. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our IK. In fact, before I do that, there's a couple of things I'm going to do before I'm going to do the next stage. You can see here when we select this that we've got these rotational positions here. And when we go to our rotation, you can see when we want to rotate a particular location, you can see, like as usual so far, it's out by 45 degrees. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate this with the shift key held down 45 degrees. And you notice that when I do this, it's actually shifting our geometry to the controller out of place. So in this particular case, I want to do this to the actual locator its centered position orientation by selecting the axis tool and then doing it, and then it won't move the object itself but only its position. And I'm going to rotate this until it says 45 degrees. Okay, you can see that that's given us the exact position that we need. The only thing that it's not done is it's not orientated it the way I would like it. I would like the Z to be facing forwards, so I'm going to go in there again and just rotate it one more time. This time 45 degrees, or 90 degrees shall I say. And now this controller is now going in the same direction as all the other controllers. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of the points for this controller, and again this 45 degrees is out, so I'm going to go at the axis tool again and I'm going to rotate this with the shift key held down 45 degrees, turn this off, and then I can rotate, or I can even position it actually right on the end of here just by clicking it once and then doing the 45 degrees. And that's going to set me up to rotate it. Okay, let's start to rotate this, holding down the shift key. So yeah, it looks like about 35 degrees is going to get us a nice upright position there. Yeah, 40 degrees is just a little bit too far. Another 5 degrees, that looks okay. And then from this I've actually got my first controller. I kind of preferred it there actually. Now when we select this controller, we can now move it left and right, but nothing's really assigned yet. It's not doing anything just yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the back leg, select this, and we're going to select the brand new controller, and it's replaced it with that one. And now if we move left and right, we've got control over the knee. Now we can go back up and we can remove this temporary one, and we'll just put this one in its place by just first of all copying the name and then dragging it out into the root of the back foot, and then this one we can delete. We no longer need it. And that's set up our first controller. The next thing we need to do is need to make sure that when we move our IK leg, that what happens is everything moves with it. We can do exactly the same thing for down here. We're going to go for the IK for here, so the S, and there's the second IK, and we're going to go down here, we're going to add that pole. That pole is going to be positioned like this. Now when you move this pole, it can flip, say like this. You can, well, it'd be a good idea if we select the pole first. So when you move this pole, you can actually have a flip on it. So there's something that can be altered. I like to bring this kind of in the middle, somewhere like that. And then if you go to the IK settings for that, what you can do is you can flip it, and it's normally Y or negative Y that will flip it the correct way. And you know which is which because it will put it back to where it belongs. And now this is going to give us the control to do that. And as I said, sometimes these poles actually do start off in its position below, so it keeps it like that, and you can still have control over it, and this kind of gives you the control that you may want because you're actually moving it left to right and it's not in reverse. So it's entirely up to you where you put that pole, as long as you've been given that kind of control to be able to work with it. That's really the main thing. So as an example there, if I leave that there, it shouldn't be too much of a problem for now. Maybe later on we can try different things, but I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to select this, hold down the shift key, go to our splines. I'm going to add a similar kind of shape, but this one's going to be smaller, and we're going to hold down the Alt key and do it in increments. Let's select that with the rotate, the control key, and then the shift key held down. We'll do a 90 degrees, select both of them, right click and connect objects and delete. Okay, you see that all done. Then we can, with our axis tool turned on, we can rotate this so that it's rotated to a better axis than what it is at the moment. Yep, so we want our Y to be pointing up. So we will hold that shift key, 45 degrees in our particular case. There we go. And of course we've got that movement there. Well, we will have that movement there. I'm going to go back into my IK settings, and I'm just going to drag and drop this new controller in place. You shouldn't see anything pop or move. If you do, then something's done wrong. I'm then going to copy this naming, put it into there, paste, drag that up where it does belong. And this is the claw part of it, so we've got that pole for the foot IK and that pole for the claw IK. Remember to go back and clear anything that we don't need anymore. And now we've got those two poles there. When we finally completed it, it will look like this. You're going to have everything set up in a way in which we've got the IK all working for us the way that it should do. As you can see there, we've got the main leg IK, and then we have the foot IK. You can see the pole is moving with that, same setup. And we have the rotation of the claw. We've got the independent control over the position of the knee of each of these, as well as the position of the tarsus bones. Check that all of them are working like that, and if they are, everything should be good and ready to move on to the next stage. The next stage is we're going to move on to the thorax and the abdomen so that we can create some controllers and indeed create this IK rig that we need set up. The first thing is I want to create a master controller or a main controller that's going to be responsible for the whole entire body. To do this, I'm going to create my own custom controller. And there's several ways in which we can do this, and I'm going to go to a brand new one there, and I'm going to go back to this controller that I created earlier on. I'm going to use this as a starting point. Select all of these points that I don't want, and we're just going to start with this just for the moment here. So that's just manipulate this, and I'm going to select this. We want it to be centered onto this. We go to the axis center and it should center it for us. Then we're going to hold down the control key and then the shift simultaneously and rotate it 90 degrees so that we get this. We're going to select both of these and we're going to combine them both together. Connect and delete. Up until that point all is good. I'm going to go open the axis center here, and see on the x-axis we take it a negative. It puts it right at this position at the end, or it puts it at the opposite end if you go to the other way. And this is going to give me a good starting point then to use our symmetry. You put that into symmetry. I'm good with that. And we're going to make it editable and combine them that way. And I think I've got what I need from this. Let's just see what the points are doing here. Yeah, these points, if we can delete them, would be good, but I think we're still pretty okay with this, to be quite honest with you. It's given me what I need for this particular controller. Let's select it. I'm going to rotate this up 90 degrees. I'm just going to scale this down a little bit. Yeah, that's good. Just something that we can select. I'm going to give it a completely different color. Let's go for something like that. And then let's just copy this and paste this into the scene. It's probably going to be ginormous. Yeah, it is. In fact, we can just scale it in a normal way. And we can bring it into a center position to see just how big we make this. This is going to be the controller for the main body. I'm going to keep this high enough that it obscures going into the mesh. I've got some of the other parts of the mesh hidden as well. Thorax would be one of them. You see here, I don't want to go too close to that, so I think that's sufficient to be able to select it there. And then we just turn off our meshes again. Now what we need to do is we just need to orientate this so that it's at the correct pivot point. So for us, that would be right there. I'm going to turn on my snapping. Snap that right to that point. You can actually see that even the snapping for this joint here isn't 100% in the correct place. You can see there's an extra little joint in there. That's regarded as the thorax. I'm not sure. That should be there. We'll just check it with our mesh to make sure it's still in a good position for us for the abdomen. The abdomen should be showing right now. I've got a feeling I may have hit it at another point, so we're going to go to our selection and show all, and then that comes back, and let's just look at this from the side, make sure it's aligned still right down the center, and it is. So it's just a minor adjustment that I made there. That's not going to have a negative impact because we really do need to have things aligned up well. So we've got this thorax here, then we've got the abdomen from that point onwards. That's good. and this controller, I want the controller to be facing the same way as the thorax, so I'm going to rotate this controller 180 degrees. Okay, now that we've done that, we can select this thorax and then select our controller that we've just made. Let's call this body controller. Actually, tell you what, we'll call it body controller, because this is what essentially it's going to be. I'm going to select that and then that, and then I'm going to be applying a parent constraint, add parent constraint. Now, it's over here, but we can access this from the character menu, constraints, and it's there. Add parent constraint. This now means that when we move this controller, it's going to move all of this. So that's that one dealt with. The next thing that we're going to want to do is add a IK setup, and the IK setup needs to be right from the very beginning to the end of the abdomen, right between those two. So I'm going to select both of those, create an IK chain. It's added a goal. We can just test this out right now. You can see that it's working as it should. Even though we've got this created for us, we still want our own custom controller in there, and this can be anything that you want. It can even be a text object if you want, so that's something that you could possibly do if you wanted to. So we could just add a text object here. Get it on the right axis there. We call this say Abdomen Ik. Put that so right down, small enough. Again, checking it doesn't get in the way of the mesh or anything like that. We can position this any way that we feel is fit. Something that way you can see quite easily when we select it. And let's select this. We're going to make it editable. I'm going to call this yeah, it is the abdomen, isn't it? Abdomen Ik. That's what we're going to use it for. The goal is there, so all we need to do is just move this to the goal with the axis center on and our snapping on. We just move it down and lock it in place. Again, the lock-in isn't always that precise, so really make sure that you do get it there. Also want to make sure that the handles are in the same location. There's a slight little pop there, just a very slight amount of movement, but that's not going to have any effect on us at all. Rather than drag this inside here, I'm going to opt just to put this inside the IK for this. So there it is there. There's the IK. And we will go to the tag, and there's the goal. We're going to drag and drop a new goal in there and delete the old one. We could have just drag and dropped it inside that if we wanted to, but I just wanted to show you, as long as you've got the axes lined up, everything should be fine. And also you do have the ability to make sure that when it comes to certain other constraints, that you can actually do the offset trick, or use the offset feature, shall I say, so it doesn't make everything move when you put something in there that's of a different orientation as a controller. But that's done now, so when we select this and we move this, we've now got that done for us. The other thing is I want to be able to grab this as a separate control and rotate it. So I'm going to add a custom controller. Let's go back a few steps. I'm going to add a custom controller exactly for that. Let's see if we can go back enough times to get back to the basics. Yeah, that's the one. And let's have a look how many points we got in this. I'm going to look at it from the top view there. Let's see what we can do with this. I would like to splice it up, I think, a few times. We could try going for the subdivide. That will give us that. We'll do that again. That will give us enough points to do what I want to do with this. We're now going to grab this controller and if it's a rotational controller, I add the /ROT on the end. I'm going to copy this and put this into here. And again, let's just get this positioned and scaled. Center to axis of the object. This is found in the Tools menu under Axis there. And I want to rotate this 90 degrees. Shift key will help lock that into place. And that's get the Z axis. In fact, that's get all of these centered off. And we don't need this as big as that, but what I do want to do is I want to create a nice curve to it, and to do that I'm going to use the geometry and the project tool. So that's turn on our layers meshes, and I want to project that against this, and that's kind of, I want to move it and keep it clear of this so we don't get too close to it. I think that would be fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a sphere, and we're going to make it nice and smooth. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, and I'm just going to use it as a proxy object to create this shape. Let's just stretch that out a little bit, make it editable so that we can stretch it out a little bit, and that will be absolutely perfect for what I want. Right click, project, and then apply. And this time it's going to project onto the sphere, which we can now delete. And now we're going to have a nice smooth controller. This contour is going to look much better now, as you can see there. From this we can change the bender type to something like a B spline, and that makes it look even more smoother, as you can see there. I quite like that. It's quite nice. We can manipulate that a little bit. Yeah. There's probably going to be a few other places that I want to have this. I'm going to leave that the way it was, like that. That's good enough for me. Anything to do with rotation, I'm going to stick to that throughout. So I'm probably going to end up using this for the wings as well. So I'm going to just make a copy of that. I'm going to call this wings and hide it in visibility terms anyway. And then we can go to our layers, disable the mesh visibility, and then I want this to match the position of this, and I'm simply just going to use the same method that I've been using so far. When the controller is already aligned on the axis, it's easy to use the snapping tools, but when your controller is not aligned, you can be fumbling around for a little while. The next thing I obviously want to do is just have a look at this and see if the orientation matches. You can see that it doesn't, so I'm going to select this controller. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. If it will let me. I should have looked at it without the weld axis on before I started to do that, because that will give you something a little bit different to what it actually is. So now I know. It was a 45-degree rotation that it needed. And it looks like it needed a little bit more than that. There we are, that's got it. Let's select that. All good? Yeah, good. Now we're going to select this bone, press the S key to select it. You can see here we've got the IK tag on there. That's for the beginning of the IK tag, but now we need to add a constraint. So we're going to constrain that to that, holding the shift key. You need to select it in that order for it to work, and then we're going to apply a parent constraint. Now the only thing that we really need is rotation, so we can use the rotation constraint, and then when you go to the constraint, you see here that it's applied the transform constraint on the rotation only. When we select this, when you select this and rotate it, you can see here that for some reason the abdomen is not rotating, and there's a good reason for that, and that is because we've got the IK right at the end there. So all we need to do in this particular case is grab the IK and put it inside the rotation controller, so that when the rotation controller rotates, it rotates the IK with it. See there? Go to the basics, and I'm going to change its color to something like that we've already used so far, and maybe what color is that? It's only white at the moment. Let's change that to a blue or something like that. You can see how it's coming on. We've then got the head, and the same kind of thing applies. We can go to create a new controller in advanced. Let's move this above the head. We'll make it editable, and we can do some manipulation to this, whatever that may be that you want to do. You can just say position it to kind of match more the contour of the head. Maybe we turn the mesh visibility on. Let's move this over the head. something like that could be perfectly adequate as a head controller. We call this head. The head controller is going to need to move along with the body, this one here, so we will put this controller inside the thorax controller, and we've called this body. Put the head inside the body, and then we're gonna find our head. Turn the mesh off. Find our head, which is there obviously. We've got a head controller. I'm going to move its access point with the snap in to where the head actually is. Head, as you can see, is pointing the opposite direction. For consistency, therefore, we can select our controller and with the axis center on there, and rotate this 90 degrees. Not too concerned about anything else there, to be quite honest with you. This is going to be behaving exactly fine as we want it, but as I said, for consistency, I'm going to rotate things in the right degree, the right direction. And that's good. And now that's moved that. Snap it right where it needs to be. Not sure how that got off axis there, because the head should be directly above it. Yeah. I find in them case scenarios, just clicking on the center 2 will bring it back to the center of there, and then you stand more chance of getting it snap into the correct location. You see there? That's all good. And now select the head controller, and then add parent constraint, remembering that it's all taken from the character menu in the constraints there. So we're going to add a parent constraint. By doing that, now when we select the head controller, turn everything else off, snapping, etc., that we can now rotate the head. You can see how things are building up for us nicely there. And the body controller in turn also needs to go into the correct places. You can see here this abdomen, that also belongs inside the body controller. This means that the abdomen, the IK and the head are all inside the body controller. So when we select that body controller, everything moves with it. When we select the individual controllers, we've got the ability to still do what they need to do to perform. As you would expect to happen. In the next video, we're going to go over a quick overview of what we have so far, and then we're going to move on to the next step. If you like my content and have learned something from it, please give a thumbs up and subscribe. I'm not monetizing my content, it's for free, made for you in my own free time. So please give me some support back by hitting that thumbs up and subscribing. The next part of this video tutorial will be up very soon, and we will continue where we left off. So stay tuned.